What if, instead of 9 months of back pain, bizarre food cravings, and a rather dramatic finale, you could just lay an egg? You'd find a comfortable spot, endure a rather strenuous afternoon, and then there it is. A neat, self-contained solution to human reproduction, sitting on the living room floor. Problem solved, right? Well, once you get over the initial shock, you realize this isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a completely different one. Because changing that one fundamental biological process unleashes a cascade of consequences that would reshape our bodies, our homes, our societies, and the very essence of what it means to be human. So let's crack this open. The first thing we need to establish is the egg itself. This isn't your standard breakfast fare. A human infant's head is about 11 centimeters in diameter. To accommodate a full-term fetus, even curled up, we're talking about an ovoid object roughly 30 centimeters long and weighing between 5 and 6 kilograms. Picture a rugby ball made of porcelain with the heft of a bowling ball. The shell would need to be thick, a robust calcium carbonate structure strong enough to protect its precious cargo, but not so strong a newborn couldn't eventually break its way out. Our story begins with Alara. She's just gone through the laying process. It was intense, but now it's over, and on a pile of carefully arranged cushions rests her egg, a smooth, pale, and frankly intimidating object. The immediate, unexpectedly mundane problem presents itself. Now what? She can't just pop it in a handbag. The phrase, "don't drop the baby," has just become a terrifying prenatal reality. Nanoseconds after the first Homo sapiens laid an egg, our entire evolutionary trajectory forked. To successfully pass a 6-kilogram calcified sphere, the female pelvis couldn't be the narrow, efficient structure it is today. It would need to be significantly wider, with more flexible ligaments. This change has a direct consequence on how we move. Our graceful, long-distance running stride, gone. We'd be a species of waddlers. Our center of gravity would be lower, our gait less efficient. The Olympic 100-meter dash would be less dashing. Minutes after Alara lays her egg, the biological reality sinks in. The 9-month internal marathon is over. Instead, we're looking at a new model, perhaps a 1 or 2 month internal gestation, where the embryo develops and is supplied with a massive nutrient-rich yolk. Then, the laying, followed by a roughly 7-month period of external incubation. This single change completely dismantles one of the most fundamental pillars of human society, the biological division of parental labor. Pregnancy, for all its challenges, is an exclusively female experience. But incubation? An egg just needs to be kept warm, around 37 degrees Celsius, and safe. Anyone can do that. Suddenly, the biological imperative for mothers to be the primary caregivers vanishes. Month 3 of incubation. We check back in with Alara. She's at work. Her partner, meanwhile, is at home carefully rotating the egg in their state-of-the-art home incubator, the OvaSense 9000. He's adjusting the humidity levels from an app on his phone. The concepts of maternity and paternity leave have merged into a single, universal hatching leave. The boardroom and the nesting room are now equally accessible to both sexes from day one. This isn't a social construct, it's a biological one. The responsibility for the next generation is by default a perfect 50-50 split. Zooming out, this shared responsibility would have shaped our earliest ancestors. A vulnerable egg sitting in a nest for 7 months is a huge liability. You can't just carry it with you on a mammoth hunt. This would have accelerated the need for permanent settlements. The first human villages may not have been built around a well or a fertile patch of land, but around a safe, defensible, communal nesting site. A cave with a geothermal vent would have been the most valuable real estate on the planet. The phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child," becomes biologically literal. It would take a village just to keep the eggs warm. This brings us to our modern world, shaped by millennia of egg laying. Architecture would be completely different. The centerpiece of a family home wouldn't be the kitchen or the living room. It would be the nesting room, a climate-controlled, soundproofed, biosecure chamber, often built without windows and with reinforced walls. Real estate listings would boast of triple insulated nesting walls and backup geothermal power for uninterrupted incubation. Stairs would be a design flaw, a constant threat to anyone transporting an egg from one floor to another. The economy would be unrecognizable. The biggest industry on the planet wouldn't be tech or finance, but incubation solutions. Companies with names like Hatch Corp and Nest Tech would be global giants. We'd have smart incubators with biometric scanners, live streaming yolk cams, and AI-driven alerts that monitor shell integrity and embryonic heart rate. A whole industry would exist for egg transportation. Forget baby strollers. We'd have gyroscopically stabilized, climate-controlled, shock-absorbent egg pods. The high-end models would look like something designed by NASA. Hatching day. Alara and her partner are anxiously watching the monitor. A hairline fracture has appeared on the egg's surface, detected by the OvaSense's acoustic sensors. Inside, their baby is preparing to emerge. Human hatchlings would need an egg tooth, a small sharp protuberance on the tip of their nose or forehead, specifically for breaking the shell. It would fall off a few days after hatching, becoming the first memento in the baby book. The hatchling pushes its way out, not into the sterile environment of a hospital, but into the world of its home. And here we hit another major biological divergence. A fetus in a womb is directly connected to the mother's immune system, receiving a constant supply of antibodies. An embryo in an egg is isolated. It would receive a starter pack of immunities through the yolk, but it would be born far more immunologically naive and vulnerable than a human baby is today. The first few hours of life would be critical, requiring an almost fanatical level of cleanliness. The cultural obsession with hand washing and sterilization would be ingrained in our species' DNA. And there's one more, rather profound physical change. Look down. That little knot in the middle of your abdomen, your belly button, it wouldn't exist. There was no umbilical cord, no physical tether to another human being. It's a small change, but it's an incredibly powerful symbol. We would enter the world as truly separate individuals from the very beginning. You're 18. Alara's child is now a teenager. How has this oviparous or egg-laying upbringing shaped their psychology and our culture? The very concept of mother would be different. The word would still exist, but it would be stripped of the intense physical mythology of pregnancy and birth. It would be a term of care and nurturing, but not one of exclusive biological connection. It might even lessen the Oedipus complex if you're into that sort of thing. Our language would be riddled with egg-based metaphors. Don't count your hatchlings before they pip. You've got to break a few shells to make a society. A watched egg never hatches. The phrase empty nest syndrome would be a far more literal and poignant complaint for parents whose incubation room has fallen silent. Our art would change. The iconography of the pregnant Madonna, a cornerstone of Western art, would be replaced by images of a watchful protector standing guard over a precious, sacred egg. Our origin stories would change. Not born of woman, but hatched from the cosmic egg. A myth that already exists in many cultures, but would now be our literal biological truth. Our sense of self, our relationship to our parents, our entire societal structure. Everything would be different. But perhaps the most significant change is the most subtle. The 9 months of pregnancy create an unbreakable, intimate physical bond between mother and child, a bond of shared blood, breath, and heartbeat. By removing that, by placing the child in an external vessel, you sever that primary exclusive connection. You might think this would make us a colder, more disconnected species. I think it would do the exact opposite. Without that guaranteed biological bond, our survival as a species would have depended far more heavily on something else. Trust. Trust in our partners to take their turn warming the egg. Trust in our community to protect the nesting grounds. Trust in our technology to see our offspring safely to hatching. We wouldn't be connected by an umbilical cord, but by the shared, fragile, and desperate responsibility of the nest. Our entire civilization would be built on the premise that we absolutely must rely on each other, because the future is in a delicate shell that any one of us could accidentally drop. We would be a species of anxious, waddling, belly-buttonless people who understand, on a primal genetic level, that our greatest strength isn't in the power of the individual, but in the collective warmth of the community. And our greatest evolutionary achievement wouldn't be the microchip or the rocket or the internet. It would have been the invention of really, really good bubble wrap.